Have you ever just stopped and wondered, where did that random thought I just had come from? Or, how does your mind cook up those bizarre, incredible worlds when you're dreaming? It's a question we've all asked ourselves. Where do our thoughts and dreams really, truly begin? For the longest time, this has been a massive scientific mystery. We know the brain is the command center, right? But finding the actual starting point of a single thought, it's like trying to trace one raindrop all the way back to its specific cloud. But here's a thought. What if the answer isn't a single point at all? Today, we're going to unpack a framework that suggests the starting line actually changes depending on your state of mind. So the traditional thinking went something like this. Our thoughts must start in the parts of the brain that handle the outside world, our sensory and visual centers. And it makes sense, right? What we see, what we touch, what we hear, that must be the entry point for everything we think about. And here they are, the usual suspects. You've got the parietal lobe, which helps us understand where we are in space, the occipital lobe, for all things visual, the prefrontal cortex, our reasoning hub. All of these are, without a doubt, absolutely essential for thinking. But here's the catch. This map is incomplete. It doesn't even begin to explain the Grand Canyon-sized difference between a focused, logical thought and a chaotic, surreal dream. So, this is the big idea. What if there isn't one fixed starting line for our thoughts? What if the origin point for all this mental activity, what scientists call mentation, actually shifts? This framework proposes that the way we generate a waking thought is fundamentally completely different from how we create a dream. All right, let's dive into that first path, our conscious waking thought. You know the kind of thinking you're doing this very second, processing all this information? Turns out, our waking thoughts are usually anchored by facts. They kick off with something objective, an object you see across the room, a concept you remember from a book, a specific place you're thinking about. This starting point is called the fact memory anchor, and it's rooted deep in the logical parts of our brain, like the parietal and prefrontal cortex. Now sure, emotion can influence what we think about, but it doesn't light the fuse. The fact always comes first. Okay, so if facts anchor our waking thoughts, what in the world is going on in the wild west of our dreams? Well, when we're asleep, it's like the brain's rulebook gets thrown right out the window, and everything starts from a totally different place. Dreams, on the other hand, are anchored by emotion. They don't begin with a fact. They begin with a feeling, a sudden pulse of fear, a wave of pure joy, a sharp pang of desire. This is the emotion memory anchor, and it sparks to life in our brain's emotional centers, like the amygdala. Here, the roles are completely flipped. Emotion is the engine driving the whole thing, and any facts or memories that pop up are just the scenery for the emotional story your brain is trying to tell. Okay, so we've got two different starting points. Facts when we're awake, emotions when we're asleep. But how does the brain actually build a thought or a dream from those sparks? To understand that, we gotta look under the hood at the brain's internal weather system. This system has two key parts. First, you've got these strain carrier waves. Think of these as the stage, or maybe the rhythm section of a band. They're these big, global brain waves that provide the timing and the beat for everything to happen. Then, riding right on top of those waves are the neural strain flows. Now, these are the storyline. They're like little jet streams carrying the actual stuff of your thoughts, the memories, the themes, the specific ideas. And what is all that stuff made of? Well, here's the kicker. Both our logical thoughts and our wild dreams are built from the exact same raw material. They're called residual strain packages. Basically, they're little echoes of brain activity, leftover bits and pieces from your day, from conversations, from things you saw, from feelings you had, all scattered across your brain like seeds waiting to sprout. So, we have these scattered raw materials. The next big question is, how do they go from being just a fleeting feeling or random flicker to a fully focused thought or a super vivid dream? Well, they have to mature. How mature a thought becomes and how conscious we actually are of it seems to depend on three key things. The strength of any thought is basically a product of its frequency, its duration, and its resonance. In simple terms, how fast is the signal firing, how long can we hang on to it, and how many other related ideas does it manage to pull in? So let's break that down. For a thought to get really clear and stable, first, it needs high frequency. It has to cycle super fast along a neural pathway. Second, it needs duration. You have to hold it in your mind long enough for it to stabilize. And finally, it needs strong resonance. It needs to recruit other related memories to add detail and richness. That's literally what's happening when you concentrate on something.
You are actively maturing a thought.
Now, this whole idea of maturity is incredibly powerful because you know what? It might finally give us a solid answer to one of the biggest questions we have about our minds. Why on earth are dreams so ridiculously easy to forget? The answer, it seems, is pretty simple. Most dreams have very low maturity. The neural flows that create them are shaky and short-lived, so they only form these really fragile memory traces. Plus, since they're driven by emotion, they don't get that logical backup from the prefrontal cortex that helps cement our waking thoughts into memory. And then comes the final blow. The second your alarm goes off, a flood of real-world data, sights, sounds, feelings, rushes into your brain and just washes those delicate dream traces away.
So let's bring this all home. When you look at it side by side, you see our mind really does seem to have two parallel paths. Our waking thoughts kick off with facts in the logical cortex, creating focused neural flows and strong lasting memories. But our dreams? They start with emotion, deep in the limbic system, creating random, unstable flows and weak memories that just fade away. It's like our brain is running two totally different operating systems, using the same hardware to create two completely different versions of consciousness.
And that leaves us with one last, kind of mind-bending question to chew on. If our logical waking reality and our wild imaginative dream worlds are built from the exact same raw material, just these leftover bits from our day, then what truly separates them? Maybe, just maybe, the only real difference is where a thought begins and how much focus we choose to give it.